There is a place in the vast, frozen north of Canada that few have heard of, but once you do, it's impossible to forget. Nestled deep in the Kivalliq region of what is now Nunavut, Lake Anjikuni lies still and silent beneath a blanket of snow and time. It's not marked by grand cities or famous history books. It's known for something else, a story that has haunted the wilderness for nearly a century. The story of an entire village that disappeared. It was November of 1930. The winds were cold and sharp, slicing through the barren trees and sweeping snow across the ice-covered land. Joe LaBelle, a seasoned Canadian fur trapper, was making his regular route through the Arctic trails. He knew the region well. He knew its dangers, and he also knew the small Inuit settlement along Lake Anjikuni, a place he'd visited many times before. The villagers were friendly, their fires warm, their laughter comforting in the middle of the desolate wild. But when LaBelle approached the village that day, something felt wrong. The air was unnaturally still. No children played in the snow. No dogs barked from behind huts. No smoke curled into the sky from chimneys. There was only the wind and silence. He stepped into the village cautiously, calling out to the people he once knew. No one answered. The huts stood undisturbed, their entrances flapping gently in the breeze. Inside, he found clothes hanging neatly. Pots filled with frozen stew sat above long-dead fire pits. Guns rested in their racks, untouched. Half-knitted garments were left unfinished on the floor. Everything was there, except for the people. Then LaBelle found the sled dogs, still tied to posts. Several had died of starvation. Others were missing. For any northern community, sled dogs meant survival. Leaving them behind was unthinkable, but these villagers had done just that. Or had they? Confused and disturbed, LaBelle spent the night in one of the huts. He later recalled being unable to sleep, haunted not by ghosts, but by the absence of life. He felt watched, even though the village was clearly empty. The next morning, he made his way to the nearest telegraph office, pushing through the snow for hours. Once there, he told authorities what he had seen. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police responded quickly. Within days, a patrol team led by Sergeant Nelson arrived at the site, and what they found confirmed everything Joe LaBelle had reported. The village was untouched but empty, not destroyed, as if every man, woman, and child had simply vanished at once. Even the Mounties, trained to remain calm, felt uneasy. It didn't make sense. How could a whole community disappear without leaving footprints, without dragging away food or tools or belongings? Their investigation led them to the edge of the village, where a small burial site lay beneath the snow. There, things took a darker turn. Several graves had been opened, not by animals but by human hands. In some cases, the stone markers were missing. In others, strange arrangements of rocks and carvings had been left behind. And most disturbing of all, many of the graves were empty. The Mounties tried to make sense of it. Perhaps it was a spiritual ritual, but the community had never shown signs of such practices before. And where were the bodies now? While the search continued, reports began surfacing from hunters and trappers in nearby regions. They spoke of strange lights seen above the lake on the night the village disappeared. Not the northern lights, they said, but glowing orbs of blue light, hovering silently in the sky. One man claimed he saw the orbs float above the trees before disappearing straight into the lake. Even the Mounties, tough as they were, admitted they couldn't explain what had happened. No sign of struggle. No blood, no bodies, just a village frozen in time. The story spread across the country. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Entire village vanishes in northern Canada," and "The Arctic mystery no one can solve." In the years that followed, the legend of Lake Anjikuni grew. It was featured in books, on radio, and eventually in television documentaries. Some called it one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in Canadian history. Others said it was nothing more than myth. Theories piled up over the decades. One of the most grounded explanations suggested that the villagers had simply moved elsewhere, in search of better hunting or shelter. But that theory didn't explain why they left everything behind, including their dogs and weapons. It didn't explain why there were no tracks, no footprints, no trail of supplies. Another theory pointed to disease. Perhaps a fast-moving illness had swept through the village, and in panic, the survivors fled. But that didn't explain the missing graves, or the lights in the sky. Then there were those who believed the answer wasn't human at all. Some claimed the village had been taken by aliens, by supernatural forces, by something not of this world. The blue orbs, the missing people, the disturbed graves. It fit the pattern, they said, of abduction, of testing, of something far beyond our comprehension. Skeptics, of course, weren't convinced. Years later, the RCMP denied that any such disappearance ever took place. They claimed the entire story may have been fabricated or exaggerated by journalists and paranormal writers. No record of the 1930 investigation could be found, they said. No proof that a village had ever existed on the shores of Lake Anjikuni. But Joe LaBelle's original account was detailed and sincere. He had nothing to gain by lying. In fact, he seemed genuinely shaken by what he saw. And what about the elders in the region? Some Inuit families spoke quietly of a place where their ancestors once lived before something happened that made them leave forever. They avoided the topic. Some would not speak of it at all. Modern explorers have attempted to locate the original village site, but changing weather patterns, melting permafrost, and decades of snow have erased all trace of what may have once stood there. Today, Lake Anjikuni is as silent as it was that day in 1930. The lake remains frozen for much of the year. The forests surrounding it are thick and there are no signs, no monuments, no plaques, only wind, snow, and questions. What happened to those villagers? Were they taken by something? Did they leave of their own free will? Or was it something else? Something older and colder than we can imagine. In the end, Lake Anjikuni's mystery is not just about a disappearance. It's about what lies beyond explanation. It's about the haunting possibility that in a world mapped by satellites and covered by science, there are still places where logic cannot go. The village is gone, but the story remains. Passed from trapper to traveler, from radio to page, from one whispering wind to the next. And somewhere beneath the ice, perhaps the truth waits, frozen like the lake itself.